Hello and welcome to the Route 1 show here on YouTube. We're taking a look at Bradford City now, and I'm delighted to say joining us now from the Telegraph and Argos to discuss everything to do with the Bantams. It's Simon Parker. Simon, thank you very much for joining us again, mate.
No problems. Good to see you, Steve.
Yeah, you too. It's been a few weeks since we had you on the show, and fortunes have improved a little bit with the last couple of performances. We can't start anywhere else other than an incredible 3-2 away win against Stevenage. Nobody really saw that coming, did they?
Well, no, and certainly at half time, no one saw it coming. Blimey, it was one of those afterwards where you thought, did that just happen? It was a very, very strange afternoon, but at the end of it, a hell of a result, and the performance second half earned the fantastic result. You know, they really turned it round because, you know, you've got to stop a bit of a juggernaut down there, particularly. You know, they obviously talked beforehand about not getting dragged into a Stevenage basketball game where, you know, where the ball just goes one end to the other flying around. But it's all right saying it, but actually doing it and stopping them doing it is, you know, and the thing was, the first half, of course, it was just getting hoofed, and it's very difficult to do anything against it. You know, every time City tried to get the ball down, they were pounced on, and it was, you know, it was sort of 100 miles an hour, and it was frenetic, and it was just how they wanted it. And then, of course, they concede, which didn't help.
What was going on before the game? Because it wasn't, they were kind of...
It's a
few
little bits going on. Yeah, apparently, I think you find a few groundsmen do it, but probably not to the extent that Stevenage's man did. You know, he just wandered around in deliberate spots where Colin Doyle was trying to warm the keepers up. You know, it's all bits and bobs, and there was things with the GPS on the side. They wouldn't let them. That didn't seem to work for some reason. They wouldn't let them do it, and they wouldn't let the analysts film. You know, it was all a little bit silly, but I think that just sort of stoked it up. I think, you know, as Mark Hughes said afterwards, it made victory all the sweeter. I think he quite enjoyed, you know, putting one over there, all the shenanigans going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think at half-time then, what do you think his message was to them? Because
he sort of said about, you've got to be brave on the ball, just sort of try and, you know, you're only going to get a couple of touches, but make them count. You know, ping the ball around a bit quicker and just sort of open them up, because, you know, if they're swarming all over you ping a pass out, then suddenly there's a little gap there, and, you know, you sort of build around them like that. Obviously, it's easier said than done. And then they came out, first 5 minutes, second half, it looked much the same, you know, but until, you know, Matt Derbyshire struck a fantastic equaliser, which, having missed a sort of similar half volley just before half time when you thought that was the chance, you know, the second one pops up. You know, Andy Cook does a great job in holding the ball up, laying it off to him, and the finish. As a man there who's scored goals all his career, you know, at much higher levels, very calm finish in off the bar, and suddenly that, you know, the belief surged on and off the pitch, and from that point on, you know, City were right in the game.
Yeah, absolutely, and a penalty as well. That
I mean, when you see
how many times have they not?
I know, but it was ironic. I mean, from our angle, you couldn't see anything because where we were sat is quite flat, the press box, and the angle it was, you couldn't see. But obviously, when you see the actual TV footage, the guys pulling Matt Platt's shirt all over the place. You know, it is a penalty, and Steve Evans, you know, who often sees rather different games to other people, even he said, you know, he did say, we never get a penalty, but that is a penalty. So, you know, he grudgingly admitted it was the right decision. And I think, and Hughes was amazed because, as he said, it goes on every week at this level and never gets punished. Yeah. So he said it's about time, because it is a penalty, but, you know, it was nice to get one going their way after the soft and dubious ones have gone against them over the months. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the weird situation with the fan getting on the pitch? And
well, that's just sort of, it was one of them afternoons. You know, everything was going on. You know, there was all sorts going on, but yeah, you know, they obviously pegged back the 2-2 again. Stevenage from a corner. You know, this is zonal marking from corners. Got caught out with, you know, the big boys go powering forward. But at that point, you think last 10 minutes, blimey, they're going to be, you know, it's going to be the Alamo. He brought on Kieran Kelly for the first time as a third centre half. You know, basically to think we're going to be battered here, for Dane Oliver as well. But, you know, they go the other way on the break, and Jamie Walker, you know, great finish. And of course, everyone's going bonkers, 86-minute goal. And just as about to restart, you suddenly realise there's an idiot sprinting across the pitch, basically trying to get at Andy Cook. It was like, what the hell? And Andy Cook, of course, wasn't even facing that way, so he didn't know. So thankfully, the Stevenage players were downside more, you know, alert to the situation than the stewards were. Yeah. And basically sort of formed a bit of a ring round him, and, you know, I think they blocked him off and then frog marched him away before the stewards actually did their job, and and took him out the ground and arrested him. And he was obviously arrested and he's been charged. But yeah, it was, it did beg questions about what the stewards were doing, to be fair, because there didn't seem to be much pursuit, and it was very half-hearted until the players have basically done the job for them.
Yeah, is this another Steve Evans ploy or something?
Well,
at
the time you think, it's a bit of a sideshow, but then you also think, well, yeah, if he had something in his pocket, you don't know, do you? And if he'd gone out there, it's all right saying he was going out to thump Andy Cook, and good luck to him if he tried, to be fair. But if he'd had something, he could have been talking about a very serious incident, So I think they need to take big action, and something needs to happen against the club as well, you'd imagine, because they can't, you can't be having people gallivanting on with all sorts of intentions, can you? So
no, absolutely not. I did enjoy Steve Evans after the match. He said about a big club that should be winning.
Yeah. And he said there's still how many points behind us. But they are. We could now say they're 9 behind, but they were 14 before that game, so it's changed a bit. It's amazing what a few days does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bradford City, and to be able to pull a result out like that. I mean, I know in your article you mentioned about we have Spurs here as a phrase, and
it was
Bantams. It should be another phrase really, because it's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, Stevenage's home record as well.
But they, you look back the last couple of seasons they've done this. They went last year. They went to Forest Green. It was Mark Hughes' first win. Forest Green were top, played him off the park 1-2-0. And the year before, behind closed doors, and Mark Truman, they went to Cheltenham, who were absolutely flying. I mean, they get promoted and won 2-0 down there. So they've got passed for doing this sort of thing. Unfortunately, both those times the season then fizzled out. So you hope that's, but hopefully this time they use it as a launch pad, and because that's the sort of big result that I think it's given everyone, restored a lot of belief in people, and that's why it's important they build on that now.
Yeah, and Andy Cook scoring, and that incredible. He's got the most away league goals.
To
see his name above, Harry Kane and Haaland. I mean, it's again, it's a tribute to him, isn't it? Really. Do you think it was actually a good idea that he was rested for a bit and now he's?
Yeah, I mean, it's in hindsight now. It's easy to say, well, if they left him in, how many goals would he have scored? But he levelled out before that. He'd looked a bit off the boil. Because he'd set such a high standard all season. And he looked a bit off the boil by his standards. He looked like he was a little bit flat. And then there was the Carlisle game on Boxing Day, first game for 3 weeks. They looked rusty, and he missed 2 very good chances. By his standards, they were really big chances. And that's probably, I think that was the final straw in the manager's thinking, saying, he's got to come out. He needs a break, get him out the firing line. We've got another big centre forward. Let's give him a few weeks to sort of recharge his batteries. And it looks like it's worked, doesn't it? Because Andy Cook's come back basically with the attitude. I think he only played about an hour in 5 games in the meantime off the bench. So he's come back with an attitude almost like, I'll show the manager as much as anything, which is what Mark Hughes wanted. And he looks now as sharp as he did earlier in the season, and he's taken his goals well. His hold up play is very good at the moment. He's assisting as well. It's not just about his goals, and he looks the player that he was September, October.
Yeah, absolutely. He scored again last night against Tranmere as well. A relatively comfortable win for Bradford there. Yeah.
It was one of those, because you look at it and you think, Tranmere, where they are, they've been very inconsistent. But in the previous 4 games, they've beaten Salford obviously on Saturday, and they've beaten Leyton Orient as well. So they don't concede many, and when they turn up, they can turn over the better team. So it was a tricky one, and particularly with the. On the back of Saturday's result, it was right. Let's prove that wasn't a one-off. Let's follow it up. And they had everyone behind the ball at first. You think it's going to be one of those sort of games, and they wore them down. And ultimately, Tranmere didn't have a single shot on target. So they got the job done. It was a professional job, and for once a comfortable home game. And it's been a while since we've had one of them.
Absolutely, and it leaves Bradford City now in 8th, and those 2 wins, you've got to say vital really, because it's just brought them back up a little bit. What have you made over the kind of period that they've gone through the last couple of months with results, and it's kind of strange really. I know there's been kind of murmurings about the style of play and everything, and how fans have been, what they've been thinking about that, if it needs to be more direct.
I think again, I'm not saying an apology. I think half the issue with their season was the fact that the 2 months were so disjointed. They played 2 games in November and 3 in December. And suddenly you've got that they haven't got any rhythm. You know, there's no momentum because they play one game, then it'll be called off, then it'll be a week without a game, and it was so stop and start. And you know, that you can't keep playing at the top level if you're going to be stop start like that. And as for the style, yeah, you know, that's a point. I mean, I raised it with him last night because there were a few murmurings at 1-0. There's a few grumbles when they're knocking it around the defence and that. And he said, look, that's the way we like to play, but we were trying to draw them out. You know, it was a case of they wouldn't come onto us. We're trying to draw them onto us. They're losing, so let's see them come out. And then once they do, we play around them. And he said, you know, we'll go long as well, but we're not going to do it too much, you know, because I think people sort of say, oh, get it forward. But, you know, would they accept Stevenage style, Steve Evans long ball at Valley Parade? No, they wouldn't, you know, and we all know they wouldn't. And we wouldn't, you know, it'd be awful to watch. It's a horrible watch. You know, there aren't many teams in the division who play the way City do in that passing style. And it can be an acquired taste at times. You know, it can look a bit slow and ponderous when it's not sort of popping the ball around. But last night it was drawing the sting out of them, and then several times when, ironically, when the sort of the jeers were quite audible, the move would end up with a decent pass and a chance. So it's, you know, it's one of those where you've got to stick with it. The manager's not going to change. He's mixed it up more than he did at the start of the season now. I mean, they will play that long ball game that you wouldn't have touched sort of in September. But you know, he's not going to move away from these passing principles because that's how he's had teams all through his career. You know, admittedly, players a lot higher level, but you know, he's not going to change his principles, and he doesn't sort of see why he should in this, you know, in the fourth tier. And I think he wants to prove they can succeed with that, with the players good enough. But sometimes it can be a bit of a flat watch at times. But you know, if it gets the results done, and last night ultimately, as you say, was a very comfortable, confident victory.
Yeah, it does. But it does sound like it makes sense as well, doesn't it? Getting these teams who are just sitting back at Valley Parade and putting the low block on it. It does make sense. You think, right, get them out, get them pressing.
Exactly. Particularly when they're 1 up, especially when you're winning. So it's not a case. It's not in Tranmere's interest to sit back and just say, right, you have the ball. We're not going to bother about it. You know, they've got to, at some point they've got to chase it. So, you know, but it was just nice to have a 2-0 incident-free home win. It's been a long, long time. You know, you sort of look at these results and you think everyone else gets them. Why can't Bradford City get them? You know, so no luck. You came up. I think the board said 4 minutes at the end, and you thought, yes, so what? Whereas normally you're sort of like, by that point you're sort of shaking, panicking, wreck. Yeah, so it was quite nice just to sort of see it out and have a match report written with 5 minutes to go, knowing it's not going to change. Yeah. So that's a rarity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Barrow up next, and it's at home, and they're on a terrible run. That does feel like a banana skin waiting time.
Well, exactly. I mean, if it was the other way around, if this had been Barrow last night, straight after Stevenage, then you'd have really been looking at the alarm bells ringing. But I mean, on the back of last night and the way they sort of went about the job, I think that's given them a lot of confidence. You know, they've had the 2 wins, and you talk to the players and you sense they've got the bit between their teeth. You know, people like Adam Clayton, who's made such a difference. You know, you just sort of given them a real sort of steely edge to that midfield, and you know, you can sort of see his influence rubbing off on those around him. Those sort of people, and you don't think they're going to sort of freak out against, you know, sides they expected to beat, and everyone says, oh yeah, you know, the Barrow, was it one win in 12 or something, which is, you know, they had such a great start of the season, first half, didn't they? Yeah. And ultimately, you know, their aim this season is to be well away from the relegation zone, and they will be. But, you know, obviously they're on a bad run, and it's a good time to play, and they've got key players missing. So, yeah, as you say, it's all teed up. But on the back of this week, I will hold my hand up and say they will not cock it up.
There you go. You said it now. You said it. Good stuff. Well, you hope. I mean, do you think? Would you expect City to make the playoffs this season? Are you kind of?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, at the start of the season, the pre-season predictions, which, you know, particularly the more critical members of the TNA online community like to point out every single week they don't win, but I still haven't ruled out them in the top 3. And I certainly think they will be in the top 7. And if they're not in the top 7, I think looking at the squad, you can sort of point the finger and say, well, why aren't you in the top 7? Because that squad is good enough to be up there.
Yeah. But
certainly, you know, I mean, you know, we talk about Stevenage, and Stevenage is still 9 points away. But that's second place. But you know, they've had, obviously they lost to City. got pegged back by a late-ish equaliser against Newport last night. So that gap's gone from 14 to 9, which sure is still a huge gap, but that shows how quickly you can make inroads. And there's a lot of midweek games coming up. I think this is the first of 4 in 6 weeks last night.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you can get on a roll, it's all ifs and buts, isn't it? But if you get that roll, you can make very quick progress. You know, you see other teams do it, they'll win 4 or 5 in a row. And if this lot can do that, and there's no reason why they can't, then, you know, you're right up there, you know, in the mix with it. So,
yeah, I mean, even Carlisle seem to have dropped off a bit, don't they?
Well, Carlisle, a classic example, aren't they? They won 5 in a row, or 4 or 5 in a row. And they were absolutely flying. I think they hammered Barrow 5-1. They were, you know, beating everybody. And then since then, they lost at home to Harrogate. They got a 0-0 draw at Wimbledon, and they got thumped last night by Mansfield. They haven't scored in all 3 games. Yeah. So it's like you wouldn't have seen any of that coming, but that's the difference, isn't it? You know, City have picked up 5 points in 2 games on Carlisle. So it's, you know, but that can happen. But, you know, alternatively, if you suddenly drop like that, then everyone claws everything back very quickly. But it makes for an exciting couple of months potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a fully fit and refreshed Andy Cook up front as well, you're always going to be in with a chance, aren't you?
Yeah, hopefully.
Good stuff. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like and do subscribe to the channel for more Bradford City content as well. Simon, absolute pleasure as always. Thank you very much for joining us, mate.
No worries, Steve. See you next week.